The lightning split the sky wide open just as Owen Dalton's horse reared back, spooked by the sudden crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very earth beneath them. He tightened his grip on the reins, his knuckles white against the worn leather as he fought to keep his seat. The storm had come out of nowhere on this July evening in 1883, turning the Nevada desert into a battleground of wind and rain. He was still 3 miles from Goldfield, and the road ahead was quickly becoming a river of mud. Through the sheets of rain, Owen spotted something that made him pull his mount to a halt. A wagon sat tilted at an awkward angle off the side of the road, one wheel clearly broken. The canvas covering billowed and snapped in the wind like a living thing. But it was the sound that cut through the storm that made his blood run cold. A woman's scream, raw and primal, echoed into the night. Owen urged his horse forward, dismounting before the animal had even fully stopped. He grabbed his saddlebag and the lantern hanging from his saddle horn, though the rain threatened to extinguish it before he could reach shelter. The wagon rocked violently in the wind as he approached. "Hello," he called out, his voice barely carrying over the storm. "Are you hurt?" Another scream answered him, and Owen did not wait for further invitation. He climbed up onto the wagon and pulled back the canvas flap. The lantern light fell upon a scene that would be burned into his memory forever. A woman lay on a makeshift bed of blankets, her face contorted in pain, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat despite the cool rain. Her dress was soaked through, and her hands clutched at the fabric with white-knuckled desperation. "Oh God," she gasped, her eyes finding his. They were the color of honey, he noticed, even in her agony. "Please, you have to help me. The baby is coming." Owen felt his heart slam against his ribs. He was 26 years old, had broken wild horses and faced down cattle rustlers, had survived a rattlesnake bite and a bullet wound, but he had never delivered a baby. Still, looking at this woman, alone and terrified in the middle of a thunderstorm, he knew he could not turn away. "All right," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady as he set the lantern on a crate secured to the wagon bed. "All right, I am here. You are not alone. What is your name?" "Willa," she managed between labored breaths. "Willa Jensen. My husband, he was driving." The wheel broke and the horses bolted. "He went after them hours ago. He has not come back." Owen shook water from his hat and moved closer, his mind racing through everything he had ever seen during calving season on his father's ranch. It was not the same, he knew, but it was all he had to work with. The wagon lurched as another gust of wind hit it, and Willa cried out again. "How long have you been in labor?" Owen asked, rolling up his sleeves. The rain hammered on the canvas above them, and lightning flashed, casting strange shadows across the cramped space. "Since this morning," Willa said, her voice trembling. "It was not supposed to happen for another month. We were heading to Goldfield. My husband got work at the mines. We were going to start fresh there." Owen nodded, though his concern deepened. A baby coming early was never good news. He moved to examine her, trying to remember everything he had heard the doctor say when his sister-in-law had given birth back in Texas. "I need you to trust me, Willa. I am going to help you through this." She looked at him with those honey-colored eyes, fear and hope warring in their depths. "I do not even know your name." "Owen Dalton," he said, giving her what he hoped was a reassuring smile despite his own terror. "And I promise you, I am not going to let anything happen to you or your baby." The next contraction hit her hard, and Willa's scream was swallowed by a crack of thunder so loud it seemed the sky itself was tearing apart. Owen worked quickly, using what clean fabric he could find in the wagon to prepare for the delivery. His hands were steady despite the fear coursing through him. The lantern flickered and danced with each gust of wind that found its way through the canvas, but he adjusted the wick to keep it burning bright. "You are doing good," Owen said, though he had no real idea if that was true. "Real good, Willa. Just keep breathing." "I cannot do this," she sobbed, her head falling back against the rolled-up quilt serving as a pillow. "I cannot, Owen. Something is wrong. It hurts too much." "Yes, you can," he said firmly, moving to kneel beside her. He took her hand, surprised by the strength of her grip when the next pain came. "You are the strongest woman I have ever met, and you are going to bring this baby into the world. Do you hear me?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face mixing with the sweat. Owen had never felt more out of his depth, but he could not let her see that. The storm raged on around them, the wagon creaking and groaning with each blast of wind. He had to get this baby delivered before the whole structure collapsed, or before the storm washed them all away. Time became meaningless in that wagon. Owen lost track of how long they labored together, Willa pushing when he told her to push, breathing when he told her to breathe. He talked to her constantly, telling her about his ranch in Texas, about the time he won a horse race in San Antonio, about anything and everything to keep her focused. And Willa, despite her pain, listened. She asked questions between contractions, her voice getting weaker but her spirit somehow remaining strong. "Tell me about your family," she gasped, her hand crushing his. "My father runs cattle," Owen said, checking her progress in the dim lantern light. "My mother died when I was 12. I have 2 brothers and a sister. They are all married now, settled down. I am the only one who could not seem to stay in one place." "Why did you leave?" Willa asked, her eyes finding his again. Owen paused, considering the question. "I suppose I was looking for something. I just never knew what until tonight." Before Willa could respond, another contraction seized her, and this time Owen saw what he had been waiting for. "The baby is coming," he said, positioning himself. "Willa, when the next pain comes, you need to push with everything you have got. Do you understand?" She nodded, her face pale but determined. The lantern light caught the planes of her face, and even in her exhausted state, Owen thought she was beautiful. The thought surprised him, came out of nowhere, but he pushed it aside. There would be time for such things later if they all survived this night. The next contraction came, and Willa pushed. Owen could see the baby's head, dark hair matted and slick. "That is it," he encouraged. "One more, Willa, one more big push." Lightning illuminated the wagon like daylight for a brief, blinding moment. Thunder followed immediately, so close Owen felt it in his chest. Willa screamed, pushed, and suddenly Owen was holding a tiny, slippery infant in his hands. For a heartbeat, the baby was silent, and Owen's blood turned to ice. Then the child let out a wail that somehow carried over the storm, and Owen laughed with relief. "It is a boy," he announced, his voice thick with emotion he had not expected. He used a clean cloth to wipe the baby's face and mouth, then wrapped him in the cleanest blanket he could find. "You have a son, Willa." Willa was crying, her whole body shaking as Owen placed the baby on her chest. The infant quieted almost immediately, seeming to recognize his mother's heartbeat. Owen worked quickly to finish the delivery, tying off the cord with steady hands despite the trembling that had started in his limbs. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, leaving him shaky but exhilarated. "He is perfect," Willa whispered, staring down at her son with wonder. "He is absolutely perfect." Owen sat back, watching mother and child in the golden glow of the lantern. The storm was beginning to ease, the thunder growing more distant, though the rain still fell steadily. He realized he was grinning like a fool, but he could not seem to stop. He had just delivered a baby, in a wagon, during a thunderstorm. It seemed impossible, like something from a dime novel, but the proof was right there in Willa's arms. "Thank you," Willa said softly, looking up at him. Owen, I cannot ever thank you enough. You saved our lives tonight. You did all the hard work, Owen said, feeling his face heat despite the cool air. I just helped a little. More than a little, Willa insisted. She looked down at her son again, running a finger gently over his tiny cheek. What time is it, do you know? Owen pulled out his pocket watch, tilting it toward the lantern. Just past midnight. It is July 15th now. Willa nodded slowly, as if committing the date to memory. The baby stirred against her chest, making small sounds that were not quite cries. Owen watched them, feeling something shift in his chest. He had ridden into this storm alone, thinking only of reaching Goldfield and finding a warm bed for the night. Now, everything had changed. He could not explain it, did not fully understand it himself, but he knew with absolute certainty that his life would never be the same. I need to go check on my horse, Owen said, though he was reluctant to leave. And see if I can fix that wheel enough to get you into town. You both need to see a real doctor. Please do not be long, Willa said, and there was something in her voice that made Owen's heart skip. I will be right outside, he promised. He climbed out of the wagon into the rain, which had indeed lessened to a steady drizzle. His horse stood nearby, head down and looking miserable but unharmed. Owen quickly checked the wagon wheel and found it broken beyond his ability to repair in the dark with no proper tools. They would have to wait for dawn. He retrieved his bedroll from his saddle, along with some jerky and a canteen of water. When he climbed back into the wagon, Willa had managed to get the baby properly situated, though she still looked exhausted and pale. Owen spread his bedroll out on the floor of the wagon, giving Willa as much space as possible. The wheel is too damaged, he explained. We will have to wait until morning. Then I will ride into Goldfield and bring back help. Willa's face fell. My husband, he should have been back by now. Owen did not want to voice his concerns about that. A man who would leave his laboring wife alone to chase after horses was either desperate or a fool. And if he had not returned after all these hours, there was a good chance something bad had happened. But he kept those thoughts to himself. Try to rest, he said instead. Both of you, I will keep watch. You must be exhausted too, Willa said. You should sleep. I am fine, Owen lied. In truth, he was bone-tired, but he could not bring himself to close his eyes. What if something went wrong with Willa or the baby while he slept? What if her husband returned and got the wrong idea about finding another man in the wagon with his wife? They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain patter against the canvas. The lantern burned steadily, creating a small bubble of warmth and light in the vast darkness of the desert night. The baby made soft sucking sounds, and Willa hummed a tuneless lullaby. Tell me more about yourself, Willa said suddenly. It helps to talk, keeps me from thinking too much. Owen shifted, trying to find a comfortable position on the hard wagon floor. What do you want to know? Everything, Willa said with a small smile. We have all night, it seems. So Owen talked. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could properly walk. He told her about his mother, who had been a school teacher before she married his father, and how she had insisted all her children learn to read and write and do figures. He told her about the first time he broke a wild horse, about the time he and his brothers got lost in a canyon and spent 3 days finding their way home. He told her about the restlessness that had driven him away from Texas, the need to see what lay beyond the next horizon. And Willa listened, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts, making sympathetic sounds at the sad ones. She seemed genuinely interested, and Owen found himself telling her things he had never told anyone. About his fears and hopes, about the loneliness that sometimes crept in during the long nights on the trail, about his dream of having his own place someday, somewhere he could build something lasting. What about you? Owen asked when he finally ran out of stories. "Tell me about Willa Jensen." Willa's smile faded slightly. She looked down at her sleeping son, her fingers tracing gentle patterns on his blanket. "There is not much to tell. I grew up in Missouri on a farm. My parents both died of fever when I was 16. I had no other family, so I went to work at a boarding house in town. That is where I met Thomas, my husband. He seemed kind at first, ambitious. He said he was going to make his fortune out west, and he asked me to come with him." She paused, and Owen waited, sensing there was more. "I said yes because I was alone and scared, and he offered me a way out," Willa continued quietly. "We married 6 months ago. The baby came as a surprise. Thomas was not happy about it, said it was bad timing, that we could not afford another mouth to feed. When he got the letter about the mining job in Goldfield, he insisted we leave right away, even though I told him I was too far along to travel. He said we could not pass up the opportunity." Owen felt anger kindle in his chest. What kind of man dragged his pregnant wife across the desert against medical advice? What kind of man left her alone in a broken wagon during a thunderstorm? "I am sorry," Willa said, looking up at him with those honey eyes. "I should not be telling you all this. You have already done so much. I should not burden you with my troubles." "It is no burden," Owen said firmly, "and you have nothing to apologize for." They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence now. The rain had stopped completely, and Owen could hear the drip of water from the wagon cover. The baby stirred and whimpered, and Willa adjusted him, murmuring soft words until he settled again. "I want to name him Owen," Willa said suddenly, "after you, if that is all right." Owen felt something warm and tight in his chest. "Willa, you do not have to do that. I want to," she insisted. "You gave him life tonight. You gave us both life. I want him to carry your name, to always remember that there are good men in this world. Men who help strangers without asking for anything in return." "I would be honored," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. Willa smiled, and it transformed her whole face. Despite the exhaustion, despite everything she had been through, she was radiant. "Owen Jensen," she said softly, testing the name. "It sounds right." As dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Owen finally allowed himself to doze. He woke to find Willa watching him, the baby still sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Owen replied, sitting up and wincing at the stiffness in his back. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Willa admitted, "but better than I have any right to feel, I think." Owen nodded and climbed out of the wagon to assess the situation in daylight. The desert stretched around them, washed clean by the storm. His horse was grazing on some scrub grass a few yards away. There was no sign of Willa's husband or the missing horses. He checked the wagon wheel again, confirming what he had suspected. It would need to be completely replaced. He came back to Willa with a plan. "I am going to ride into Goldfield," he said. "It should not take more than an hour there and back. I will bring a doctor and someone who can fix the wagon." Fear flashed across Willa's face. "You are coming back?" "Of course," Owen said, surprised by the question. "I told you I would." "Thomas said he would come back too," Willa said quietly. Owen crouched down beside the wagon, looking up at her. "I am not Thomas. I promise you, Willa, I will be back before you know it." She nodded, seeming to accept his word. Owen mounted his horse and rode hard for Goldfield, his mind churning the entire way. He should not be feeling what he was feeling. Willa was a married woman, mother to a newborn child. It did not matter that her husband was a fool who had abandoned her. It did not matter that Owen's heart raced every time she smiled at him. It was wrong, and he knew it. But knowing something was wrong did not make the feeling go away. Goldfield was a bustling mining town, grown fat on silver strikes and ambitious men. Owen found the doctor first, a gruff older man named Dr. Brennan who agreed to come immediately when Owen explained the situation. They collected a wheelwright named Pete, loaded a replacement wheel onto a wagon, and headed back toward where Owen had left Willa. His heart lifted when he saw the broken wagon still sitting where he had left it, canvas flapping gently in the morning breeze. He had half feared it would be gone, that he had imagined the whole thing. But then Willa appeared at the back of the wagon, holding baby Owen, and smiled with such relief that it took his breath away. Dr. Brennan examined both mother and baby, pronouncing them both in remarkably good health considering the circumstances. "You did good work here, son," he told Owen. "This little one might not have made it if you had not been here." While Pete worked on replacing the wheel, Owen stood awkwardly to the side, unsure of what to do with himself. Willa was dressed now in a clean dress, her hair brushed and tied back. She looked tired but beautiful in the morning light. "Have you seen any sign of my husband?" she asked Dr. Brennan. The doctor shook his head. "No, madam, but I will make some inquiries when we get back to town. Someone might have seen him." The wheel was fixed within the hour. Dr. Brennan drove the wagon with Willa and baby Owen, while Pete followed in his own wagon. Owen rode alongside on his horse, unable to take his eyes off Willa for long. She caught him looking more than once and smiled each time, and Owen felt that warmth in his chest grow stronger. They reached Goldfield just before noon. Dr. Brennan took Willa and the baby to his office, insisting they stay there until they were fully recovered. Owen paid Pete for the wheel and found himself at loose ends. He should ride on, he knew. He had been heading to California, planning to look for work on one of the big ranches in the Sacramento Valley. Goldfield had never been part of his plans, but he found himself renting a room at the boarding house instead. Just for a few days, he told himself. Just to make sure Willa and the baby were all right. Just to see if there was any news of Thomas Jensen. He visited the sheriff's office, describing Thomas to the deputy on duty. The deputy promised to keep an eye out but did not seem particularly concerned. Men disappeared in the desert all the time, he explained. Sometimes they were found, sometimes they were not. Owen spent the afternoon asking around town, showing up at the saloons and mining offices, describing Thomas to anyone who would listen. No one had seen him. The horses had not been found either. It was as if the man had simply vanished into the storm. As the sun began to set, Owen found himself walking toward Dr. Brennan's office. He told himself he just wanted to check on Willa to make sure she had everything she needed. But when he knocked on the door and Willa answered with baby Owen in her arms, her face lighting up at the sight of him, he knew he was lying to himself. "Owen," she said warmly, "come in. I was hoping you would stop by, Doctor." Brennan's office had a small apartment attached where he sometimes kept patients who needed extended care. Willa had been given a room with a bed, a chair, and a small table. It was simple but clean and infinitely better than the wagon. "How are you both?" Owen asked, unable to stop himself from smiling at the baby. "We are well," Willa said. "Dr. Brennan says we can leave tomorrow if we want, but I am not sure where we would go. I have no money for a room and Thomas booked our lodgings, but I do not know where." "I will help you figure it out," Owen promised. "Did you have any belongings in the wagon?" "Not much," Willa said. "A trunk with some clothes and linens, a few dishes. Everything we owned fit in that wagon." Owen nodded. "I will retrieve it for you tomorrow. And I have been asking around about Thomas. No one has seen him, but I will keep looking." Willa's expression was hard to read. "Thank you. I know I should be more worried, but honestly, Owen, I find I am more relieved than anything. Does that make me a terrible person?" "No," Owen said firmly. It makes you honest." They sat together as the light faded, talking quietly so as not to wake the baby. Willa told Owen more about her life, about the dreams she had once had of being a teacher like her mother, about the books she loved to read, about the garden she hoped to have someday. And Owen listened, falling a little more in love with every word. He knew it was wrong. He knew he should leave, should ride out of Goldfield and never look back. But when Willa's hand found his in the dimness, her fingers intertwining with his own, he could not bring himself to pull away. "I do not know what to do," Willa whispered. "I am married to a man who may be dead or may have abandoned me. I have a newborn son and no way to support him. I should be terrified, but when you are here, I feel safe." "You are safe," Owen said, squeezing her hand. "I am not going to let anything bad happen to you or little Owen. I promise you that." "You cannot promise that," Willa said sadly. "You have your own life to live. You were heading somewhere before you found us. You should not have to change your plans for strangers." "You are not strangers anymore," Owen said, "and my plans can wait." The next few days fell into a pattern. Owen spent his mornings asking around town about Thomas, though the trail grew colder with each passing day. He retrieved Willa's belongings from the wagon and found her a room at the same boarding house where he was staying. The landlady, a kind widow named Mrs. Chen, gave Willa a reduced rate when Owen explained the situation, and paid the first week in advance. Owen spent his afternoons helping Willa settle in, fixing things around her room that needed fixing, buying supplies that she and the baby needed. He told himself he was just being helpful, just doing what any decent man would do. But he knew the truth. He was falling in love with Willa Jensen, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The evenings were the best part of his day. He would visit Willa's room, and they would talk while baby Owen slept or nursed, or made those small baby sounds that Owen was coming to love. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to favorite foods to childhood memories. Willa was smart and funny and kind, and Owen found himself thinking about her every moment they were apart. 2 weeks after the storm, the sheriff came to the boarding house with news. Thomas Jensen's body had been found 20 miles south of Goldfield. He had apparently fallen from his horse and broken his neck. The death would have been instantaneous, the sheriff said. Thomas would not have suffered. Owen was with Willa when she received the news. She cried, though he suspected it was more from relief than grief. She was free now, legally and morally, but she was also alone with a newborn baby and no resources. "What will you do?" Owen asked gently after the sheriff left. Willa wiped her eyes and looked down at baby Owen, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I do not know. I suppose I will have to find work. Mrs. Chen might let me help around the boarding house in exchange for room and board. Or you could marry me," Owen said. The words were out before he could stop them, hanging in the air between them like something alive. Willa's eyes went wide, her mouth falling open in shock. "Owen, you cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious about anything in my life," he said, moving to kneel in front of her chair. "I know it is fast. I know people will talk. But Willa, I love you. I have loved you since that night in the wagon when you were so brave and strong and beautiful. I love your son. I want to give you both a home, a family, a future. Say yes. Please say yes." Willa was crying again, but these were different tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have tried not to. I told myself it was too soon, that I was just grateful for what you did. But it is more than that, so much more. You are the kindest, most decent man I have ever known, and yes, Owen. Yes, I will marry you." Owen pulled her into his arms, careful not to crush the baby between them. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and finally her lips, a soft, gentle kiss that promised everything. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. They were married 3 days later by the town preacher in a small ceremony attended by Dr. Brennan, Mrs. Chen, and a few other townspeople who had heard their story and been touched by it. Willa wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Chen had altered to fit her, and Owen wore his best shirt and a new vest he had purchased for the occasion. Baby Owen slept through the whole thing, wrapped in a blanket that Dr. Brennan's wife had made. Owen used the money he had saved for his trip to California to buy a small house on the edge of Goldfield instead. It was not much, just 3 rooms and a porch, but it had good bones and room for a garden. He got a job working for one of the mining companies, not in the mines themselves, but managing the horses and mules that hauled the ore. It was work he knew and was good at, and it paid well enough to support his new family. Willa transformed the little house into a home. She planted a garden in the spring, growing vegetables and flowers. She made curtains for the windows and quilts for the beds. She filled the rooms with warmth and laughter and love. And Owen came home every evening to his wife and son and thought himself the luckiest man alive. Baby Owen grew strong and healthy, his dark hair coming in thick, and his eyes turning the same honey color as his mother's. He took his first steps at 9 months old, toddling across the floor into Owen's waiting arms. His first word was "Papa," and Owen had to blink back tears when he heard it. On their first anniversary, Willa told Owen she was pregnant again. They both cried happy tears, holding each other close while little Owen played with his wooden toys on the floor. Their daughter was born the following spring, a healthy girl with Willa's honey eyes and Owen's dark hair. They named her Sarah, after Owen's mother. Life in Goldfield was good. The town continued to grow, and Owen was promoted to foreman of the livestock operations. He hired good men and treated them fairly, and the company prospered. Willa started taking in sewing to earn extra money, though Owen told her she did not need to. She said she enjoyed it, liked having something that was hers. Young Owen started school when he turned 6, showing his grandmother's aptitude for learning. He was bright and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked. Owen would spend hours with his son, teaching him about horses and the land, about being a man of honor and integrity. Sarah was more like her mother, gentle and kind but with a core of steel that showed itself when she was pushed. She adored her older brother and followed him everywhere, much to Owen's amusement and young Owen's occasional annoyance. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Owen and Willa's love only deepened with time. They had their disagreements, of course, but they always talked through them, always came back to the love that had brought them together on that stormy night so long ago. When young Owen turned 10, he asked his father about the story of his birth. Owen sat his son down on the porch and told him everything. About the storm and the broken wagon, about his mother's courage and strength, about holding him for the first time by lantern light while thunder shook the world. "Your mother named you after me," Owen finished, his arm around his son's shoulders. "But you should know that you have made that name your own. I am proud to share it with you." Young Owen was quiet for a long moment, processing the story. Then he looked up at his father with those honey-colored eyes. "I am glad it was you who found us that night." "So am I, son," Owen said, his voice thick. "So am I." More children came. Another boy they named Daniel, then twin girls, Emma and Grace. The little house became crowded, so Owen added on, building extra rooms and a bigger porch. The garden expanded to keep up with the growing family, and Willa taught all the children to help tend it. Owen never forgot the vow he had made that stormy night, to protect Willa and baby Owen. But it had expanded now to include all his children, this family he had never expected to have. He worked hard to provide for them, to give them opportunities he had never had. He taught his sons to ride and rope and treat everyone with respect. He taught his daughters to be strong and independent, to never settle for less than they deserved. And through it all, Willa was his partner in every way. She managed the household with grace and efficiency, raised their children to be good people, and loved Owen with a fierceness that sometimes took his breath away. They still talked for hours like they had in those early days, still found new things to discover about each other even after years of marriage. On their 20th anniversary, Owen surprised Willa with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had left Nevada since settling in Goldfield. They left the children with Mrs. Chen, who was now like a grandmother to them all, and took the train west. Willa was enchanted by the city, by the grand buildings and the ocean and the cable cars. They stayed in a fine hotel and ate in restaurants and went to the theater. But Owen's favorite moment was when they walked along the beach at sunset, hand in hand, watching the waves roll in. "You ever regret it?" Willa asked suddenly. "Giving up your plans to go to California? You ended up here anyway, just 20 years late and with a wife and 5 children in tow." Owen pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I do not regret a single moment. You and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. I was alone before that night, Willa. I did not even know how alone until I found you. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything," Willa corrected, tilting her face up to his. "You gave me love and safety and a family. You gave me a reason to believe in goodness again. I thank God every day for that storm." They kissed as the sun set over the Pacific. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life together in the light. When they returned to Goldfield, they found their children had planned a party. The house was decorated with ribbons and flowers, and half the town seemed to be crammed into the yard. There was food and music and dancing, and Owen and Willa were surrounded by people whose lives they had touched over the years. Young Owen, now 20 years old and working alongside his father at the mining company, stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that love is not about grand gestures but about showing up every day and choosing each other over and over again. Thank you for showing us what a real partnership looks like." Owen felt Willa's hand slip into his as their children and friends cheered. He looked around at the life they had built together, at the family that had started with a broken wagon and a thunderstorm, and felt his heart swell with gratitude. The years continued to roll by. The children grew up and started lives of their own. Young Owen married a schoolteacher named Margaret and gave Owen and Willa their first grandchild, a boy they named Thomas after Willa's first husband, in a gesture of forgiveness and peace. Sarah married a doctor and moved to Carson City. Daniel took over the livestock operation when Owen retired. The twins both became teachers, following in their grandmother's footsteps. Owen and Willa grew old together in the little house that had expanded and changed with their family. They spent their days in the garden, on the porch, visiting with their growing number of grandchildren. Owen's hair went white, and his hands became gnarled with arthritis, but Willa still thought he was the most handsome man she had ever seen. On a warm summer evening when Owen was 72 and Willa was 68, they sat together on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in shades of orange and pink. It was the same sky that had unleashed that terrible storm so many years ago, but tonight it was peaceful and beautiful. "You remember that night?" Willa asked, though she knew he did. They had told the story so many times to their children and grandchildren that it had become part of the family lore. "Every detail," Owen said, his arm around her shoulders. "I remember being terrified. I remember thinking I had no idea what I was doing. But mostly I remember looking at you and thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met. I was terrified too, Willa admitted. But then you were there, and somehow I knew everything would be all right. I trusted you completely, even though I did not even know your name. They sat in comfortable silence, the swing creaking gently beneath them. From inside the house, they could hear their great-granddaughter playing the piano, notes spilling out into the evening air. "We built something good, didn't we?" Owen said. "We built something wonderful," Willa corrected. "A family, a legacy, a love that will outlast us both." Owen turned to kiss her, and it was like that first kiss all over again, full of promise and hope and devotion. When they pulled apart, Willa was smiling. "I love you, Owen Dalton. I have loved you from that first night, and I will love you for whatever time we have left and beyond." "I love you too, Willa Dalton. You are my heart. You always will be." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in twilight. Inside the house, the family was gathering for dinner, their voices and laughter a testament to the life Owen and Willa had created together. And on the porch, two people who had met in a storm sat together in the calm, grateful for every moment, every memory, every choice that had led them to this perfect peace. Young Owen arrived with his family just as the stars were beginning to appear. He was 50 now, with silver threading through his dark hair, but he still had those honey-colored eyes. His own children spilled out of the wagon, running to greet their great-grandparents with hugs and kisses. "Grandpa, tell us the story," his youngest grandson begged, climbing onto Owen's lap. "The story about the storm." Owen looked at Willa, and she nodded with a smile. It was their favorite story, too, the one they never tired of telling. "Well," Owen began, settling the boy more comfortably. "It was July 14th, 1883, and I was riding through the Nevada desert when the biggest storm you ever saw came rolling in." The family gathered around as Owen told the tale, his voice strong despite his age. He told them about the lightning and thunder, about finding the broken wagon, about Willa's courage as she brought baby Owen into the world. He told them about the fear and the hope, about the lantern light dancing in the wind, about holding a newborn child for the first time and feeling his whole world shift. Willa added her own memories, about the pain and terror giving way to wonder when she held her son, about looking up at Owen and knowing with absolute certainty that he was someone special, about the decision to name her baby after the man who had saved them both. The children and grandchildren listened with rapt attention, even though they had heard it all before. It was a story that never got old, a reminder of where they all came from, of the love and courage that had started their family. When the story was finished, they moved inside for dinner. The table was crowded and noisy, filled with multiple generations all talking and laughing at once. Owen sat at the head with Willa beside him, and he looked around at all these people who existed because of one stormy night, one chance meeting, one decision to help a stranger. After dinner, as the family lingered over coffee and pie, young Owen stood to make an announcement. "Dad, Mom, Margaret, and I have some news. We are having another baby. The doctor says it is a girl." The family erupted in cheers and congratulations. It would be young Owen's 5th child, Owen and Willa's 15th grandchild, but every new life was a miracle, a gift to be celebrated. "What will you name her?" Willa asked, her eyes shining with happy tears. Young Owen looked at his wife, then back at his mother. "We were thinking, Willa, if that is all right with you." This time Willa did cry, and Owen pulled her close, his own eyes damp. "That would be more than all right," he managed to say. "That would be perfect." The evening wound down slowly, with children falling asleep in laps and parents gathering up belongings for the trip home. Young Owen was the last to leave, lingering on the porch with his father while Willa settled inside. "Dad, can I ask you something?" he said. "Anything, son." "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had not found us that night? If you had just ridden past in the storm?" Owen considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I think about the plans I had, the places I meant to go. But then I realized that none of it would have meant anything without your mother, without you and your brothers and sisters. I was not really living before that night. I was just existing, drifting from place to place with no purpose. Your mother gave me a reason to put down roots, to build something lasting. You all did." Young Owen nodded slowly. "I hope you know what an example you have been. The way you love Mom, the way you have always treated all of us. You set the bar high." "I just tried to be the man your mother deserved," Owen said. "And you kids made it easy. You gave my life meaning." They embraced, and Owen watched his son ride off into the darkness with his family. Then he went inside to find Willa already in bed, waiting for him. He climbed in beside her, and she curled against him like she had done every night for the past 46 years. Her hair was white now, and there were lines around her eyes and mouth, but to Owen she was still the beautiful woman he had met in that wagon. "We did good, didn't we?" Willa whispered. "We did," Owen agreed. "We did real good." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and never let go. The next few years brought more changes. Young Owen's daughter Willa was born healthy and strong. Daniel had another son. Sarah's oldest daughter got engaged. The family continued to grow and flourish, branches extending from the strong trunk Owen and Willa had planted all those years ago. Owen's health began to fail when he was 75. His heart was giving out, the doctor said. There was not much to be done, except make him comfortable. Owen accepted the news with equanimity. He had lived a good long life, fuller and richer than he had ever imagined possible. Willa refused to accept it at first, railing against the unfairness of it. But Owen took her hands and made her look at him. "We have been blessed," he said firmly. "We have had nearly 50 years together. We have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. We have loved each other every single day. Not everyone gets that, Willa. We have been so lucky." "I am not ready to lose you," Willa said, tears streaming down her face. "I am not going anywhere yet," Owen promised. "But when I do, I need you to promise me you will be all right. You will let the children take care of you. You will keep living and laughing and filling the world with your light." Willa could not promise that, not then. But as the weeks passed and Owen grew weaker, she began to understand what he meant. Their love was not ending. It was just changing form. It would live on in their children, in the stories they told, in the values they had instilled. On a cool October morning, with the leaves turning gold and red outside the window, Owen woke to find his whole family gathered around his bed. Young Owen was there with his wife and children. Sarah had come from Carson City. Daniel stood by the footboard with his family. The twins had brought their families. The room was crowded with people who loved him, who existed because of him. Willa sat beside him on the bed, holding his hand. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. "We are all here," she said softly. "Everyone wanted to say goodbye." Owen looked around at all those faces, seeing bits of himself and Willa reflected in each one. He tried to speak, to tell them how much he loved them, how proud he was, but the words would not come. Young Owen seemed to understand. He moved closer, taking his father's other hand. "We know, Dad. We know everything you want to say. You have shown us every day of our lives. You taught us what it means to be a good man, a good husband, a good father. You gave us an example to follow. We will make you proud. I promise you that." Owen squeezed his son's hand, then turned his gaze back to Willa. She was the last thing he wanted to see, the anchor that had kept him grounded for nearly half a century. Her honey-colored eyes were full of love and grief and gratitude. "I will see you again," Willa whispered, leaning down to kiss him. "Wherever we go next, I will find you. Just like you found me in that storm. We are not done, Owen Dalton, not by a long shot." Owen smiled, and then, surrounded by the family he loved, he let go. The funeral was held in the church in Goldfield, and it seemed like the whole town turned out. Owen had been a fixture in the community for nearly 50 years, respected and liked by everyone who knew him. The service was simple but moving, with young Owen delivering the eulogy. He told the story of his birth, of course, because it was impossible to talk about Owen Dalton without telling that story. But he also talked about the man his father had been in the years after. The way he treated every person with dignity and respect. The way he worked hard and loved harder. The way he had built a family on the foundation of love and commitment. "My father always said that the best thing he ever did was stop to help a stranger on a stormy night," young Owen said, his voice breaking. But the truth is, he kept helping people every day for the rest of his life. He helped his children grow into good people. He helped his community prosper. He helped anyone who needed it without expecting anything in return. That was just who he was, and we are all better for having known him. Willa sat in the front pew, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and listened to them celebrate the man she had loved. She cried, but they were not just tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude for the life they had shared, for the love that had sustained them, for the legacy they had built together. After the service, as they laid Owen to rest in the Goldfield Cemetery, Willa placed a single rose on his casket. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For finding me, for loving me, for giving me a life more beautiful than I ever dreamed possible. I will carry you in my heart until we meet again." The days after Owen's death were hard. Willa had never lived without him, not really. Even before they married, she had been planning a future with him. For the first time in nearly 50 years, she had to figure out who she was on her own. But she was not really alone. Her children rallied around her, making sure she was never isolated, never left to grieve by herself. Young Owen and his family moved into the house with her, filling the rooms with life and noise and laughter again. It helped. It did not take away the pain of loss, but it reminded Willa that Owen's love lived on in all these people. She started writing down the stories, all the memories she had of Owen and their life together. She filled notebook after notebook with the details she did not want to forget, the little moments that had made up their big love. She wrote about their first meeting, of course, but also about their first home, their first argument, the first time each of their children said, "I love you." She wrote about the quiet mornings and the loud dinners, the hard times and the celebrations, the ordinary days that had added up to an extraordinary life. When she was done, she had a record of their love that would outlast her, something she could pass down to future generations so they would always know the story of Owen and Willa Dalton. Willa lived for another 8 years after Owen's death. She got to meet more great-grandchildren, and even one great-great-grandchild. She watched her family continue to grow and thrive. She saw young Owen become a grandfather himself, saw him pass down the values he had learned from his father to his own children and grandchildren. On the anniversary of Owen's death each year, the whole family would gather at the cemetery. They would tell stories and cry and laugh and remember the man who had started it all. And Willa would stand at his grave and feel his presence, strong and steady as it had always been. When Willa's time came, it was peaceful. She was 84 years old, surrounded by family in the house she and Owen had built together. Young Owen sat beside her, holding her hand just like he had held his father's. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly. Willa smiled. "No. I am going to see your father again. I have missed him so much." "We will miss you too, Mom." "I know. But you have each other. You have this beautiful family. You carry your father and me with you in everything you do. We are not really gone as long as you remember us." Young Owen nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Tell me the story one more time," Willa said. "About the night you were born." So young Owen told her the story she knew by heart, the story that had defined all their lives. He told her about the storm and the broken wagon, about Owen Dalton riding out of the darkness to save them, about the lantern light and the thunder and the moment he came into the world. "Your father was so brave that night," Willa said when he finished. "So was your mother." "So were you," young Owen corrected gently. Willa smiled. "We were all brave. That is what love does. It makes you brave enough to face anything." Those were her last words. She closed her eyes, still smiling, and slipped away peacefully. And if anyone had been watching closely, they might have seen the way her face changed at the very end, lighting up with joy as if she was seeing someone she loved. They buried Willa beside Owen in the Goldfield Cemetery. On the headstone, young Owen had inscribed the words that best summed up their lives. "Together in storm and sunshine, now and always." The family that Owen and Willa built continued for generations. Their children told the story of their parents' love to their own children, who told it to theirs. The notebooks Willa had written became family treasures, passed down and read and cherished. Young Owen lived to be 92, long enough to see his own great-grandchildren grown. Before he died, he made sure to tell them all the story one more time. About a cowboy riding through a storm, a woman alone in a broken wagon, a baby born by lantern light. About a love that started in darkness and grew into something that lit up the world, because that was the real legacy of Owen and Willa Dalton. Not the house or the money or even the large family they created. It was the love they showed each other every single day, the commitment they modeled, the grace and strength they demonstrated in both good times and bad. That was what lived on, generation after generation, a guiding light in the darkness. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Owen and Willa were together again. Walking hand in hand through eternity, their love as strong and steady as it had been on that stormy night in the Nevada desert when their lives first intertwined. They had promised each other forever, and forever was exactly what they got. The little house in Goldfield still stands, now occupied by Owen and Willa's great-great-great-grandchildren. The garden still blooms every spring, and on summer evenings you can almost hear the creak of the porch swing, the echo of laughter, the ghost of conversations held in love. The storm that brought Owen and Willa together has long since passed, but the love it sparked continues to shelter and sustain their family, a refuge that will never fade in the cemetery. Their graves rest side by side, weathered by time but never forgotten. Flowers appear there regularly, left by descendants who never knew them in life but know them intimately through story. And when the wind blows just right, carrying the scent of rain across the desert, it is easy to imagine them young again, holding a newborn baby by lantern light, making promises that would echo through the ages. That is how love works after all. It does not end. It transforms. It becomes something bigger than two people, something that touches everyone it reaches. Owen Dalton rode into that storm alone, but he rode out of it with a family, a purpose, a love that would define the rest of his days. And Willa Jensen faced the darkness terrified and abandoned, but she emerged with a partner, a protector, a love that would carry her through all the years to come. They were just two people who found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. But from that chance meeting grew something miraculous, a love story for the ages, a family that would span generations, a legacy of kindness and commitment and courage that would inspire everyone who heard their tale. And it all started with a broken wagon, a thunderstorm, and a cowboy brave enough to stop and help when help was needed most. Sometimes that is all it takes. One moment of courage, one decision to show up, one act of kindness in the darkness, and from that single moment, everything can change. Owen and Willa Dalton proved that. They lived it every day of their lives together. And their story, passed down through the generations, continues to remind their descendants of the power of love, the importance of showing up, and the miracles that can happen when you open your heart to possibility, even in the middle of a storm. The lantern that lit baby Owen's birth was kept as a family heirloom, maintained carefully and displayed with pride. It became a symbol of the light that Owen Dalton brought into Willa's life, the light that their love spread to everyone around them. And though the lantern no longer burns, the light it represents continues to shine, passed from generation to generation, a beacon of hope and love that will never be extinguished. That is the true end of the story, but also just the beginning. Because love stories like Owen and Willa's do not really end. They ripple outward, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen. They become part of the fabric of a family, a community, a world. They remind us all that in our darkest moments, help might be just around the corner. That love can bloom in the most unexpected places. That courage and kindness can change everything. Owen and Willa's story is a reminder that we all have the power to be someone's hero, to show up when we are needed most, to love with everything we have. It is a call to pay attention to the moments that matter, to the chances we get to make a difference in someone's life. Because you never know when you might be riding into someone's storm, carrying the light they desperately need. And maybe, just maybe, in helping them, you will find what you have been searching for all along: a home, a family, a love that will last forever. Just like Owen Dalton did on that stormy night in 1883 when he rode out of the darkness and into the light.